to No Soul Left Behind. I'm Laura Brockway, and I am here tonight with an amazing guest, my friend Bill Robinson. He is a columnist at Newsmax. Hello, Bill.
Greetings and salutations, Laura.
I tell you, I appreciate you coming back on. I know a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, or some of the stuff we talked about the last time you were on, but I have been seriously seeing bits and pieces of the information that you shared with us kind of coming out different sources. And I can't even, you know what, I didn't even save the sources, but I'm like, ooh, that's something Bill was saying, and that's something Bill was saying. So this story is kind of coming out in pieces, so I want to tell it again as a whole story, is my thought. So
sure. Well, I can give you a quick, I can give you the quick backstory where we were last time we spoke on the air. We had left it that China purposely released this. Their original target was the United States, nowhere else. It wasn't just the result of some kind of testing accident in the Wuhan lab. That's pretty much been confirmed. Even the most ignorant people agree that this didn't come from some guy eating a bat soup in a local market. That's not how it happened at all. That was their cover story all along. And, you know, since then, there's been so much. And so at that time, initially, when I was trying to get this story published, that I wrote so long ago before the pandemic started, President Xi was very unhappy with President Trump being our president. And he badly needed Joe Biden to be president, not only because of the past associations of a corrupt senator with China, but also because he couldn't have Trump negotiating hard on tariffs and all kinds of other things. He would have never gone into Taiwan. He would have never gone after Tibet or Nepal. And he had to get rid of Trump. And the best way, he thought he wanted to have him assassinated. And that shocks most people when I say it. And
I just want to mention quickly, because you have a source that you are protecting, and you have every right to do that for his own safety, that you have a source that is close to Xi. I wanted to explain where this came from. I apologize for interrupting.
That's right. I had met a Chinese businessman 20 years before in an airport lounge, and just established a nice conversation with him. He had indicated me at the time how disenchanting it was living in China, how it was his home country, and he felt so bad about the way the government operated. We were a few years out, as I recall. I'm not sure the exact time, but somewhere in the area of 10 to 20 years after Tiananmen Square. And you know, he was just really he couldn't get out of China because he was such a rich businessman, and they like to keep those people close to the vest. And so we established a relationship where we would talk and communicate through encrypted sources. And he was telling me all along about things that the CCP were doing. None of them was ever as explosive over the last 20 years as what Xi felt he had to do in order to get around Trump and get a president he could take advantage of. So the first thing was Xi had completely been steamrolled by Trump on the tariff negotiations, and it had hurt his economy, and it had hurt his plans for global expansion. So he couldn't, even though he was friendly with Trump and looked like he was enjoying his time with Trump, he was dreading every second of it. He hated the man with a burning intensity. So he wanted to assassinate. He was furious, and he wanted to make sure Trump did not win that election. So his first idea was to assassinate Trump. Well, strangely enough, you know, the CCP underlings are not eager to cross Xi. Just like in North Korea, you can end up a target for a land-to-air missile if you push back against their leader there. So I'm surprised, but apparently the rest of the CCP said, no, that could start a nuclear war if we ever got found out doing that. And so they said much better to release this virus that we've been working on in the Wuhan lab into America and try to contain it as much as possible. Their plans were not to let it get, you got it.
This was sometime back in 2017, correct?
Correct.
sometime around
Well,
there? Okay, I
this
just
was
want to
later
establish
than,
the time
yeah, yeah,
frame as you
yeah. So
tell
the
this
time,
because
yeah.
it's important. Sorry,
So the time frame
go
was
ahead.
approximately early 2019, when the major effects of the Trump winning negotiations were really starting to hurt China. Their currency had gone down quite a bit. Their exports had gone down because the tariffs had gone up that they had to pay. So their net profit margin was down on all their exports, which you can imagine is just such large numbers that that she had to do something in order to keep his people in check. So he had been so tired of the previous 2 or 3 years of Trump just constantly winning against him in these negotiations and forcing him to keep his evil intentions out of action and to make them inert, that he decided he couldn't have Trump in anymore. And he initially wanted to assassinate him. The CCP underlings said, no, it's be a much better idea and safer for us in terms of risk to release this virus, because in fact, Fauci had helped pay, the American taxpayer had helped pay for it. And they were hoping that the American people and the American president and the CIA would think, well, they didn't do this on purpose, and we've been working with them, and, kind of develop some kind of guilt complex over it. So what they were doing when they had the outbreak, when they had the accident in Wuhan, was they were loading it on 20 CCP agents who were going to bring it over and release it in the top 20 largest metropolitan areas in the United States simultaneously. Now, for any virologist or epidemiologist, this would be a real red flag, because viruses don't transmit like that. They don't appear simultaneously at all these different places like they eventually did in the United States. They tend to go in, if they come in Los Angeles or San Francisco, they start spreading eastward at a fairly, it can sometimes be very rapid, but usually generally fairly mid-range quickness. And it takes a lot of
happened? How did it get loose?
So it got loose because they had an accident as they were packing it into, they had to be very, very tricky about how they were going to smuggle it into the US and release it. And they also had to be very tricky about how they were going to aerosolize it and infect as many people as possible. E.g. the New York City subway, e.g. a San Francisco Giants game, a Los Angeles Dodgers game, an LA Rams game. They were going for the highest infection rate they possibly could get by using places where there were a lot of people who would then go out and spread the virus as quickly as possible. And the way the virus,
to those 20 agents? Oh, I apologize.
So what happened to those 20 agents was some of them died quickly, some of the personnel in the lab died quickly, others survived, but they scrapped that idea for about 2 weeks. And then they said, it's still the best idea we got. So they loaded up another 20 agents and sent them over. And this is why we saw this unusually rapid and distributed spread of the virus. It came in simultaneously to both New York and the West Coast and other places on the East Coast. And it spread toward the middle, and also was spread in the middle to places like Dallas, Texas, and Chicago, Illinois, and all the top 20 metropolitan areas, because they wanted to get as many Americans infected as possible, take Trump's eye off the ball of winning the election, have him in the middle of one of the extraordinary things for me was that Trump was able to develop a vaccine, since debunked that it's an actual vaccine, but he didn't know that at the time. He was doing everything he could for the country. But the fact that he could keep any kind of control over an outbreak like this virus and fight it and run an election is just extraordinary. He should have been done the minute the virus started, but he wasn't.
Okay, another question for you about your source. How does your source know all this? You just mentioned that he was a businessman from China. Now, in recent years, this.
Sure. So think of Bill Gates, George Soros, and some of these other global elitists, right? And their connectivity to the Biden administration, their connectivity to Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. She keeps them close. He keeps them close. They give
So
them
he
money.
heard it from Xi. He
Yeah.
heard it directly
Well,
from
he was in
Xi's
the
mouth. I
meeting.
just
He was,
wanted to establish that
yeah.
because I don't think we really covered where this information was coming from. So
No, we
just
didn't.
wanted
No, we
everyone to
didn't.
know that your source was in the room when
Yes,
it
he
was
was in the
decided.
room. He was
Very
in the
important
room.
because I'm doing a segment to another piece that I want you to hit really quickly, which
Mhm.
is why your source would be in danger. Tell us a little bit about the background on who President Xi really is. I mean, he's a real psychopath, and I know you know a little bit of background, even about his childhood. So could you explain that a little bit? And then I think
Sure.
maybe even viewers will understand why you cannot name this person, your source's name,
Yeah,
because he
so
would
the
be
average
in great
American looks at
danger.
the average American looks at President Xi and is like, oh, he looks like almost an affable Chinese person. That's all a front.
Smile or
Uh, he
whatever.
grew up with his father. His father was a top aide to Chairman Mao. I mean, Mao himself. And so he was around during the Cultural Revolution in China in 1948. And he was close with Mao and Zhou Enlai and all these different guys who were in the hierarchy of Mao's Marxist dictatorship. And he worked for him. And one of the elements of the Cultural Revolution, it sounds so nice, doesn't it? It's one of the elements was complete and total paranoia because you never knew if you were in Mao's upper echelon of people that he trusted. You never know when he's coming to get you. And all of a sudden, you and your family would find yourself on a train somewhere to some perfectly awful camp that made Auschwitz look like a picnic.
Which
And those
happened
kinds,
for them.
yeah, oh, totally. And they're coming for us in this country.
Yeah, no, but it did happen to President Xi's father and to President Xi himself.
It happened numerous
in fact,
times. It happened. So She's father was apparently some kind of very stupid man because so if you make it to the top of a murderous organization like this, what?
it's like father, like son. I apologize.
Exactly. Well, that's the parallel I want to make. If you make it to the top of a murderous organization like the CCP, with Mao's in charge, like Xi's father did, then you would certainly not want to say anything that would get you and your family murdered or exorcised from the country or put into, you know, so Mao and his Cultural Revolution did a number of things that we've been seeing in the United States. So they make you an outcast. You disagreed with Mao on some small point. You're now an outcast. People in mobs in the street attack you and beat you up, and we've seen a lot of that. And you'll immediately lose your job or any source of income. That's the way they handle that, and we've seen a lot of that here. So the similarities are rather astounding. They'll put you and your family and send you to camps.
Communist.
Well, it's totally communist.
That communism we are living through, it is disguised, but the control mechanism is exactly the same, and the goal is exactly the same. So,
well, I've looked at
Marxism. Marxism is communism.
I've looked at yeah, it's a different flavor. It's a different flavor of, you know, these different brands are different flavors. And I've looked very closely.
It'll get there. Give us time. We'll get there. Give us time. If this kept going like it's going, and
yeah.
you know, it's only a number of years. We're only
well, I mean,
behind them, but
as a child, this President Xi, not his father, was taken away on what's called the train of tears, which was when they would separate young children from their parents and their families and put them on a boxcar train. And the reason they called it Trail of Tears is because for miles it was said you could hear the babies and the children crying in the trains as it pulled up and pulled away and load up more children. And somebody asked Xi in his adolescence or early adulthood what that was like, and he said it was no problem. I handled it. It wasn't a problem for me. It was obviously a problem for him. So this is one of the areas in which he's a psychopath. He's not understanding reality. He doesn't admit how bad it was. Can you imagine being in a boxcar with 150 other children crying and in the dark and being taken somewhere that's far away from home?
He was laughing like a hyena.
He was laughing. Said he was laughing. Exactly. So, I mean, this is the kind of man we're dealing with and the kind of distorted, warped personality we're dealing with. This is not a guy that you want to mess around with. And so that's why I say it's perfectly
psychopath
understandable.
for sure.
Psychopath for sure. So
100%. A psychopath is a person without a conscience, and that's exactly what he is. There's no denying it. And how he got there, I mean, the story about, I think, the part of that story you left out was that She had been sent to the camp, and he had escaped and arrived home, and his mother turned him in. So on the
Called the
way back
authorities.
there,
That's
he
right.
just
Called the
laughed.
authorities. And he said he completely understood that because his mother and father would have gone to jail if they were discovered there with their son. So
So they all
he
make it seem like it's self-sacrifice on their part, but it really is just, imagine what this does to torment someone's mind and someone's heart. So yes, he is that big of a psychopath, but not worthy of our pity, because we are at war with China. This was a bioweapon. People think, oh, Russia's going to start World War III. It's already started. It's already been going on for at least 2 years with China or longer, because they're poisoning our stuff. And then the COVID and all the other nonsense. So we're already in World War III. People need to wake up and
well,
work
the
up against the
Maoists.
psychopath.
So I've looked at the outbreak of communism, starting with Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, and they were bad enough. And then we got Lenin and Trotsky, and they were the Bolsheviks who started the revolution. They were absolutely terrible and abhorrent. Then they were replaced by Stalin, who was the worst of all and history's biggest murderer without any exception. They always say Mao was up with him. They were both far above Hitler. But I think Stalin had a special kind of evil that he impaled his innocent citizens on. And then Mao came in, and the Maoist kind of communism is a particularly bad flavor and a little different than the Russian flavor. Now, as the world is today, the Chinese have much more resources than the Russians. And so while the Democrats are saying Russia, 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 people like me have to go around and point out that Russia's economy is smaller than South Korea or Italy's, and we can crush them if we had put these hard, much harder than even we have now, sanctions against them a month or two ago. They wouldn't have been able to invade because they wouldn't have had the gasoline. And if we had kept our energy independence, they definitely wouldn't have had the gasoline to fill their tanks up with. So the fact that it all plays, everything Biden has done plays right into President Xi's hands. And so back to where we were that Xi wanted to assassinate Trump. He was talked out of it, and they said, let's release the virus. They released the virus. And when it broke out in the Wuhan lab, they immediately blamed it on bat soup at the wet market. That was an outright lie. And then it all of a sudden, they let it get out going to Milan, Italy. They had a huge blackout, a huge breakout to the west of China in Milan, Italy, where lots of Chinese workers were going to work on the garment industry in Milan. So they had that to explain. So they had the westward breakout to Milan, then they had the eastward breakout to the United States. Without the Milan outbreak, you would have likely only seen an outbreak in the US, especially if China had shut their borders and hadn't had the accident at the Wuhan lab. That was their plan. But they, of course, everybody says the Chinese are so brilliant. I say they're bunglers. Mm-hmm. They bungled this really badly. And since then, there have been a lot of developments.
Everyone involved is a bunch of bunglers, but that's in some ways good for us when it comes to the current day treatment they're trying to force us all on. I have to remember, oh yes, they're bunglers. So
yes,
so maybe they bungled that a lot too.
Yes. Well, so what's happened since we last spoke about this that's really interesting is, of course, we knew Anthony Fauci was involved in giving the grant almost alone of $3.5 million to the Wuhan lab. He didn't just give money, send money over to them. He'd been over there. He knew all the researchers. So he knew these people. And so it was quite ripe.
For 30 or 40 years, he knew them.
Yes, it was quite right to look at him and say, okay, what was he saying on these trips? What were the emails between them? But right now they've buried everything under the rug, as Democrats will do. And but the sad reality is, the sad reality is Anthony Fauci is a traitor of the highest order, and he was very involved in this. I've been working on during the pandemic. Obviously, Fauci had to scamper to kind of appear he had distance from the Chinese. But instead, at the beginning, he kept saying the Chinese are good people. They're being honest about whether or not how this broke out, and they weren't being honest at all. So they had Fauci doing a little cheerleader dance here in the U.S. He did that because he felt like he needed to, and he would make more money. I have confirmation, although I don't have tangible paper evidence, that Fauci's been sending money to numbered accounts in Switzerland and other places in his extended family and friends circle, so that it doesn't touch him. And he's been doing this both with the Chinese government, who have every interest in using Fauci as an idiot tool, a useful tool, and then also, most notably here, working with the big pharma. So he kept pushing remdesivir that was made by Gilead Sciences, and they've got they've been sending a lot of money to Fauci while he kills remdesivir and puts down hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, make sure that the CDC and the FDA don't approve it.
Well, 100%. And those things are, well, they couldn't get the emergency use authorization if there were treatments. So they had to squash any treatments. And we know the ivermectin works. We know the hydroxychloroquine works. And there's a couple of other things that I'm understanding that work too. But the very worst thing you can do is what the medical system is forcing on people, which is one, the ventilator in the first place, and the drug you said, I can't say it right.
Remdesivir.
That's the one. Those are the ones that we know are actually contributing to the death. And that's exactly what the system is pushing. So wake up, open your eyes, stop trusting the government. They are not your friends. The medical system, I'm not saying doctors and nurses individually are bad, although I'm sure there are some. That's not what I'm saying. There are plenty of good ones that are following orders. Now is the time to stand up, stop following orders, and start following your conscience and your heart, because you're going to stand before your God about every single time you did not stand up and do the right thing for whoever your patient was.
So I have a very good friend who told me today, he's a strong Catholic, has a Catholic family. He said, we just need to pray for America. And that was the title of an article I wrote for Newsmax. He's right. We need to pray for America. He says there's not enough prayer in America right now. And that's why the entire country is going to hell in a handbasket, why there's so many issues that could be quickly solved, and why there's such a lack of unity.
We have to turn to God. God is the only one that can help us now. And mankind got us into this mess. You really going to trust mankind to get us out of it? It's not even possible. So give up your pride. Stop thinking you have the answers, because you don't. And get down on your knees and beg God, because that's what we all need to do together. Soapbox moment. Sorry.
Yes.
No me.
Pray for America.
Absolutely. Pray for America, pray for the world. And there's a lot going on right now. We want to keep this, at a good length. So let's just do a little recap. We know that this was a bioweapon launched on us by China, and then they lied about it, and then they lied again, and then they lied again. And I don't trust any of this myself, not even the tests or anything, because they're all coming from China. And if we do not wake up and stop trying to let China solve the problems they caused for us, and not just gone beyond anything that I can even sort through at this point. But we're at war with China. So President Xi ordered this, and what do you think is coming? What do you think is coming next, or what do you think the end game is? Are we almost at the end of this fax game, or what's coming next?
Well, I think they're turning tail and running in Canada and here. Apparently, there's supposed to be some great revelation about masks or mandates from Biden tonight. I'm not even going to watch. I can't stand to watch it. But they're on the run, and when we try to hold them accountable, they say, "Well, we didn't know. Everybody was scared." I've never been afraid of this thing, and there are some people who weren't afraid because they looked at God.
If you didn't know, it's because you wouldn't listen to us when we told you so. It's a big told you so moment. But still, there are still these people who are still pushing it. Even just today, I had a conversation with someone who's still wearing a mask. And I just, at this point, you're not going to change anyone's mind. I don't even bother trying. But there are people that are still in that state, is my point. And I don't think they're ever going to see this full truth. But here you are, you're putting it out there and putting your neck on the line to tell this story that you want out there, the truth that it was truly a bio attack and it is World War III. And I just thank you for telling it here.
Well, I thank you for the opportunity, Laura.
You're going to come. Hopefully you'll come on again soon and talk to us about some of the other stuff you're doing that we decided we wouldn't bring up tonight.
Yes.
But for
Yes.
now, we're going to leave the politics out of it. And just thank you, Bill Robinson. And to all of our viewers, please watch, share, and we will see you next time on No Soul Left Behind, where we're fighting for every single soul, including yours and mine.